Hello, my name is Claudio Oliveira. I'm head of trading for Castlestone Management, and I'm here to talk a little bit about the importance of investing in agricultural funds. For the purpose of this presentation, I'll be focusing on supply and demand fundamentals and leave the importance of diversification for subsequent videos. So jumping right into it, and to sort of set the tone of this video, this chart here illustrates the percent change from 1990 to present of population, income, the demand for crude, as well as the demand for agricultural products. Now, it's important to highlight two key points of this chart. The first one is that population has risen by about 25%, but because of rising incomes of over 60%, demand for grains and meat and agricultural products in general has outpaced the population growth. So the first key point that I'd like to touch on from a demand standpoint is population growth. Population growth drives demand in the long run, and as this chart illustrates, population has risen pretty steadily since the 1950s by about 3%. Now, according to UN estimates, by 2054, world population is expected to reach 9 billion people. Now, to put it into perspective, that's about 70 million more people that need to be fed each year. Now, what we've also seen over the last few decades is a rise in income. A rise in income results in improved diets and subsequently a rise in demand for protein-rich products such as meats and food products. In fact, since 1975, world meat demand has risen by over 150%. This chart here illustrates the potential demand growth from China, India, and Brazil relative to Japan and Korea. To further illustrate the demand growth for protein consumption, this chart here illustrates China's production and consumption of meat, which has surpassed the United States as the world's dominant meat consumption market since 1995. The third key driver of agricultural demand is an increase in biofuel demand. This chart here illustrates the trend of ethanol demand since 2002, and as we know, ethanol is produced from renewable sources such as corn and sugar. So as we continue to improve existing technology, so too will demand for cleaner alternative fuel sources, particularly in developed nations. And to drive this point home, here in the U.S., and because of mandated renewable energy targets set by the U.S. government, we can clearly see in this chart that a significant percentage of corn crops are now being allocated to ethanol production. Lastly, and before switching over to supply fundamentals, I would just like to highlight that even in times of contraction, we see that food and meat demand remain pretty steady, as illustrated in this chart, which represents the years following the Great Depression. And similarly, as with the Asian crisis of the 1990s, we can see that relative to GDP growth, food demand or food consumption actually remained pretty steady. From a supply standpoint, we can start by highlighting the fact that the Earth has in fact a finite amount of land, and therefore, as population continues to rise, the amount of land to use to cultivate new crops will continue to decrease, as this chart clearly illustrates. Lastly, from a supply standpoint, is yield growth. This chart is just one of many examples that illustrates that as population rose from the 1970s pretty steadily, yields have in fact remained stagnant. So it seems to me that the case for agricultural funds is pretty self-evident. The evidence is very compelling in the long run in our view. A rising population with rising incomes requires more and more food, which can only be sustained with more and more arable land or sustained increases in yields, which I've shown that's just not the case. For more information on Aliquot Agriculture Fund or how you can get in touch with us, visit CastlestoneManagement.com. Until next time.